Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens. China and the European Union kicked off a summit in Beijing, marking 50 years of bilateral relations. The summit comes amid strained trade relations and the Ukraine war. Chinese President Xi Jinping vowed to deepen ties with the European Union but warned the bloc to make correct strategic choices. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, too, was very stern. She urged the Chinese leader to address the rising trade imbalance between the two major economies. European Union's trade deficit with China ballooned to a historic $360 billion last year. The European Union is China's largest trading partner, while China is the European Union's third. The bloc has raised tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles last year to protect its domestic industry. The move led to Beijing launching anti-dumping probes into European brandy, dairy, pork. China's stance on the Ukraine war have also complicated relations between the two. The European Union wants China to do more in bringing Russia to the negotiating table over the Ukraine conflict. Bilateral trade ties are crucial as EU still awaits a trade deal with the US, and China is on the same boat. Last month, US and China had agreed to de-escalate tensions. China allowed export of rare earth magnets, while US agreed to ease curbs on chip exports to China. However, a complete trade deal is yet to be agreed upon. Let's listen in to what the European Union Commission President said at the summit.
Europe has always believed in the power of free trade to drive prosperity, and that competition has to be fair. We know that our trade relationship today needs more balance. Rebalancing is a necessity, and it is also in the interest of a stronger relationship between us.
Joining us now to discuss this is Tianchen, senior economist at Economist Intelligence. He's joining us from China. Thank you very much, Tianchen, for joining us. There was a lot of tension in the room, especially with China refusing for a summit longer than a day. They did not want the summit to take place in Brussels, but in Beijing itself. So how do you describe the takeaways, the mood in the room as this summit happened?
Yeah, I think everybody knows expectations are low ahead of the meeting. Yeah, and you talk about that the meeting was being shortened to 1 day instead of 2 days. Yeah, but I think that is a result of some EU actions, namely that they don't want to, let's say, they're sort of holding back on their willingness to attend some ceremonies in the Chinese city of Hefei. Yeah, and of course, the EU-China economic dialogue right before the summit has been cancelled. Yeah, so I think the mood is still very, let's say, restrained. Yeah, despite some hopes for let's say breaking ice on China-EU relations. Yeah, but I would say the two sides still managed to reach some consensus. Yeah, which should help stabilize bilateral ties. Yeah, for example, even Ursula von der Leyen, who is a pretty hardline on China, admits that China-EU cooperation has become deeper. Yeah, and I think both sides expressed the idea that they don't want decoupling. Yeah, so and I think that for both the EU and China, they have ongoing trade conflicts with the US. And as a result, they cannot afford to fall out with another major trade player. Yeah, so I think this will, let's say, prevent the bilateral ties from worsening further. Yeah, because of the, let's say, the very drastic consequences. Yeah,
right. Chinese President Xi Jinping has told European Union officials that we must properly handle differences and frictions, and he criticized Brussels' recent trade actions against Beijing. What is Xi Jinping's and China's key expectations from the European Union to put the relationship at least on a stable track?
Yeah, I think, China's intention is to have the Europe drop its many anti-dumping or other trade protectionist cases against China. So you have already talked about the tariffs on Chinese EVs last year. Yeah, and right now we're having some other measures against Chinese e-commerce goods, yeah, and some other chemical materials, yeah, and so on. So I think the battleground is ever expanding, yeah, and this needs to be stopped, yeah, before the two sides can move to a more, say, constructive relations.
Right. The European Union also made some strong statements against China. And they said that European Union goods should have fair market access. There should not be any kind of barriers imposed on European Union goods and companies in the Chinese market. How do you think China is likely to respond to these demands being made by Ursula von der Leyen and the European Union?
Yeah, because I'm in Beijing, I have heard of many, let's say, concerns raised by the EU chamber, for example, and of course by EU businesses. Yeah, and I have been hearing about those complaints since I would say many years ago. Yeah, and yeah, but I believe that China has been making some progress in, let's say, opening up its market access to European producers. Yeah, for example, in the past, China, European, sorry, goods produced by European companies in China are not classified as local products in the eyes of the Chinese government. Yeah, but now the Chinese government has made a change. Yeah, so that they try to treat all those products produced in China, yeah, equally. Yeah, so I think changes are gradually happening. Yeah, but probably not at a pace that's or fast enough to meet the European demands.
Right. Do you feel that due to constant tensions and uncertainties with the US, the European Union and China will come to some sort of understanding on trade and the economic partnership?
Yeah, I think in the end, something will happen. Yeah, we're still at a low point in terms of the bilateral trade relations. Yeah, because China has been sending some goodwill. Yeah, but there are a lot of people that are sort of hotline against China in the EU leadership. Yeah, and I think that needs to be changed. Yeah, so yeah, but I think in the end, both sides will recognize the need that you really need to, let's say, improve ties. Yeah, because you are fighting another trade war with the US at the same time. Yeah, and you need to, let's say, give some concessions to each other. Yeah, so probably in the end, we're going to see that the EU is probably allowing more Chinese investments. Yeah, and China is opening up more of its markets to EU businesses. Yeah, so I think in the medium term, I'm still optimistic about the direction of travel.
Right. When it comes to rare earth magnets, is China likely to lift the curbs on rare earth exports to Europe completely?
I think it is already happening if you look at the June trade data release from China. Yeah, so that is recovering. Yeah, but it is not the same level as it was 1 year ago. Yeah, so that is gradually happening, gradually recovering as China relax its curbs. Yeah, yeah, but I would like to say that there will remain some sort of licensing approvals, and that is probably a months-long process. Yeah, and the businesses will need to be aware of that. Yeah, and I think also right now everybody knows that China has a very powerful weapon of rare earth export controls. Yeah, and you cannot rule out the possibility that China will use them again, yeah, in case of let's say escalation in tensions.
Right. And finally, how connected do you think Europe and China will remain despite the trade tensions? Are you going to see a decline in trade between EU and China, or will there be an uptick, is what you foresee in 2025 and 2026?
Yeah, I actually don't see the possibility of declines. Yeah, so even if the tensions are quite elevated this year, China's exports to the EU is still rising. Yeah, and the growth is still very quick. Yeah, and I also said before that even von der Leyen, who is a sort of a critic to China, admitted that China-EU cooperation has deepened. Yeah, although with rising trade imbalances. Yeah, so I think this will not change the overall path of China-EU economic relations. Yeah, but of course there will be some thorny issues to be sorted out.
All right. Thank you very much, Tianchen, for joining us with your perspective on the EU-China summit in Beijing. Clearly, there was tension in the room, and both sides laying down ground rules as far as the future partnership on trade and the economic partnership goes. So let's see how things roll and develop here on, especially with the US tariff structures as well. On final